Hello and welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery. Today we're going to have a look at InTouch. This exhibition was curated by Megan Young. Megan?
Hello, I'm Megan Young. I'm so excited to be with you here in the gallery for InTouch. And I'll just tell you a little bit about how we developed this project. Starting in 2022 actually, so a while ago, we were looking at all of these closures, these pandemic-related closures, and how they were starting to open up. We were starting to go back into our spaces. But people were wondering how to be normal again. How do you go to work and to school and be with friends and be at home? And how do you be close to people? And I definitely was feeling awkward. You know, do we go up to somebody and give them a hug, or do we give them a handshake? I even to this day ask people, do you want one? Or do we give distance? You know, as we had started to figure out was a kind way of showing care. And we were looking at these artists that are responding to that exactly. They were looking at their lived experience, their embodied practices, and we started to develop this exhibition around that turn of considering the body and putting that into practice. So we have 13 Ohio-based artists that are working across all kinds of disciplines, but their practices are offering us some sort of map or guidance into how to navigate that interpersonal relationship now in a new world, and then also with the backdrop of continuing to shift socio-geopolitical landscapes.
So another important piece that I want to highlight here is that Megan is actually the first curator that is exhibiting a show from our very first, for the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery, call for curatorial proposals. So we had that a couple of years ago, had great response, and Megan is the first of that. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, it's fun to remember because I did not know I would be the first. So I am both an artist practitioner, I make work, I show work, and I work as an independent curator. I was formerly associated with an institution. I worked for a long time at Spaces in Cleveland, which is an artist-run gallery. So I had an opportunity to both curate group exhibitions and then to work with artists as they were developing their own projects. After leaving that space, there weren't many opportunities for me to continue doing that work, and especially doing it at the high level that I was really excited to showcase artists. So this opportunity for me was incredibly valuable. An opportunity to continue working with artists whose practices I had grown to become really deeply embedded with, to start, you know, those conversations continue further into the future, and then obviously to work with Kat and to be here in this incredible space.
Yeah, so the real thrust of that, the want of that practice is actually so that we get to see more Ohio curatorial voices. So this is one of the first that we get to see in this space, obviously a practice curator, but it's really exciting. So I'm excited for you all to have the experiences with the cadre of curators coming up as well. But let's get to this exhibition. We have an artist just behind us. Do you want to tell us a little bit?
Yeah, so in this walkthrough, we're gonna feature each artist's pieces and talk a little bit about them, but we'll start with a piece that's right behind us. It's a really exciting entry point into the gallery, this smaller work on a pretty well-positioned wall just as you enter, and this is Yousef Abdul Latif. And the piece is part of his larger body of work in pulling in found materials and often discarded materials, repurposing them, giving them new life. And this particular one it's called the Giving Mantle. So it has almost this sense of offering as we enter into this space, as if it's welcoming us, as if we're entering someone's home or someone's personal space, and there are these objects of significance placed on top of it. You can see that the work, again, similar to his larger body of work, Yousef has a painting practice using acrylic here, found materials, wood, and if you can tell, there's actually blue painter's tape in there defining those spaces. So it considers that painterly landscape, but from a very felt, lived experience.
And something else that I really enjoy about Yousef's work is that you can really feel the call and response. Like you can tell that he is reacting to the materials taking a moment, seeing what they tell him, going back in, and it's really a dance. And there's something super lovely about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so to continue sort of thinking about that practice and that back and forth, that dance that you call it, I sometimes think about it as an improvisational practice. I was really drawn to this work as part of the exhibition because it feels almost like you get to know the artist that way. You're maybe walking with them through life the way that they move through it. And this work in particular, and if we want to show a little bit more the full body of work, it all has this improvisational gestural quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Andrew, if you want to come a little bit closer to see, I'll just pop across you here. These all are Yousef's works as well. So you can really see how his hand is in motion here, right?
Yeah, and in some pieces even, maybe not fully legible, but handwritten. And again, continuing this conversation of materiality. These are pieces that are pulled from function, from life, definitely from art practice. You can tell Yousef has a degree in art and also teaches, is based in Toledo. And so these are things you can imagine are in his studio that as it moves him, he collects and then starts to gesture on. To me, it feels incredibly spirited. In fact, the artist talks about his work as related to religion and to spirituality. And it has this sense of letting go into that, that the pieces allow him even to contemplate how he's existing, how the world is unfolding. And I feel that when I'm looking at them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's pop just over here, centrally, to our next artist, Britney Wainwright.
All right, so a transition, but some really nice conversations between artists here. Britney is a Columbus-based artist, very exciting, has an MFA from Ohio State and continues to teach there. Is a ceramicist, which you'll see from some of the details in this work, widely exhibited in Ohio and extended beyond. Before we even get into the piece, one of the things that attracted to me to Britney, how she works and what she's interested in, she also has a artist-run space here in Columbus that I have to say, finding other artists that have that practice, that work in communication, that work in collaboration, I wanted to see what she was about. So this piece is part of a larger body of work developed during pandemic. And in the artist's words, the visions and the style are developed through interest with the interior spaces, domestic spaces, home again. But the artist is abstracting them into a really unique language of visuality that she says is inspired by gardens, wallpapers, and women's bodies. And so the forms, none of those things might be, maybe over on this side here, but those things aren't immediately evident. I don't know if I would have pulled out those words from the work if they weren't told to me. But you can see how she's abstracting patterns and forms into the larger sculptural piece, into some of the components that make up what for me references like a dressing screen. Mm-hmm. The artist invites us definitely to walk around and through it because it provides an opportunity to hide, to reveal, to frame. You start to see the world in a new way through that frame, through the open space, and to look through.
I also really love, there are abstractions within abstractions here too. So that, this pocket also functions kind of visually as a flower box. And then you look closer and these lovely little coils are essentially abstracted roses that could really easily transfer into the idea of a print, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this like layering. And then these little guys that you're not allowed to touch, but they want you to so bad.
And keeping going with that window box, you have what could be considered referencing curtains with tassels. Mm-hmm. Some of this visual language makes me think about patterns from older styles of domicile, from my aunt's curtains, or these really heavily embellished interiors that are maybe coming back into fashion, but still became kind of embedded within femininity and care and how we decorate our homes to shape our lives.
I really appreciate the celebration of craft in this too. Yeah. Like it's each of these stitches is really well done. Like there is a finish to them that like brings happiness to my soul.
Yeah, because there's all this playfulness, but it's really very particularly placed and settled. Even just like you had mentioned, the slight hanging open of the pocket. We're not, unfortunately, supposed to go in and grab it, but it makes us want to. Yeah. And so the craft is very finely considered to where it invites the eye to look, to be enticed, and to be drawn in.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, who doesn't want to touch corduroy? Like, it actually might not be corduroy, but it has the look of corduroy, and you want to touch it and figure it out. Yeah. So there's that tension between what we are supposed to do as a viewer. Right. So we have to imagine what it is that we would feel, and there's some really lovely plasticity that takes place there if you allow for it. Yeah.
I also appreciate, just in thinking about the exhibition and the body and the way that we, engage touch and everything like that, the artist talks about not failure, but some of the almost meeting of goals. So for instance, something that almost functions as a pocket but might actually spill out its contents. And loosely references those things to gender, to lived experience. How does it feel to have expectations placed upon you that maybe you couldn't fully, as the art, you could not fully ever reach or meet? And so that sense of almost filling expectations is present here both in craft and in concept.
Lovely. All right, so just behind that, you can actually see them through this window. Is Pipo's work. And through that window, we have many windows. Well, one window, actually. Do you want to chat a bit?
Yeah. So Pipo's work is a photo series from his time in his home country of Vietnam. But these were all taken from within the hotel window, which was, where he was staying during a large part of the pandemic. And so this was a space that he had made his own, and he had a sort of barrier or boundary between what was his personal space, somewhat well known, what was once his home country, again, somewhat well known, and this amazing barrier of crossing into and out of those discrete spheres. And so this one is really exciting. We see the stunning photography, the craft, the technique, and also these appearances of the curtains. And it's really beautiful in this lineup too, because you can kind of see through time, it starts to set sort of a pace of like day after day, and then the different occurrences from the street scenes below.
The other thing that's really lovely about this is that it pulls you in as a viewer. You become a participant because you are looking out of your window. Yeah. So there's an engagement there that's really pretty lovely too.
Yeah. And then to place myself, even though this is a place of less familiarity to me, I can start to relate this window and this view to experiences that I've shared. So, for instance, I actually immediately think about times in Chicago or when I was in Mexico and I'm looking out a window, those chords. It's like a quintessential big city cluster of electronic infrastructure piled on top of infrastructure. And so it's a little bit unique to this space that he's capturing, but also gives me a sense of understanding his experience in relation to some of my own.
And there are Easter eggs in here, so as you look, you find more And I think that's important in work, particularly when you have a series, is you're always going to compare one to the, oh, what's different? Oh, what's the same? What's obscured? What's revealed? And have things changed within the timeline.
Right.
Which is also, it's just nice to have discovery, right?
Especially within these first 4, it feels like these views are showcasing different versions of artistic practice.
Yes.
You have, you know, almost a performative element, and then recognizable art, again, recognizable though maybe not highly regarded art, again, a performative aspect. And I love how we've set it up here in the gallery. So as we get deeper into this corner, we start to get deeper into more obscured space too, where you're wondering of a relationship, you know, kind of by a light a little farther in the distance, and maybe a game, or what is the exchange happening here.
There's other really nice things that happen within a curatorial voice too. So you have those hints of the floral in Britney's work, and then you discover they're also here. So there's kind of a cadence that happens if you allow that to be unfolded for you.
And the curtains becoming somewhat real in that curtain motif. Definitely, you're feeling these things come back and forth.
Yeah. Absolutely. So now that we're back here, we have another person that's in our flex space.
Yes.
And I'm going to stand back here and let you chat about it as Andrew pops in and has a look.
So here we have work by Laura Swedenborg. This is a performance artist working in Cleveland. She has a dance practice, also performance art. And the piece that we're looking at, Cold Coyote Calls, was actually created for the gallery space. So this is an original work, and we're the first to exhibit it. It was a collaboration developed by Laura with Cindy Penter, who had done all of the videography and the editing. And then the text for this work, which is shown within the video and inspired the exploration, was by Genevieve Jensen. These are all Northeast Ohio artists working across an interdisciplinary collaboration. For people who are not familiar, Laura Swedenborg's style of performance, especially featured here, is derived from Butoh, which she has studied and practiced for a number of years. Butoh is a Japanese post-World War II style of performance that is really exciting because it came about during a time of huge psychological and social shifts in Japan, when people, you know, very similarly to how I was discussing as part of our experiences for the exhibition, where people were navigating how are they shifting this new landscape, this new societal organization, this new way of being. And for the artist, she talks a lot about Butoh and both this work as a way to really process some of the pain and some of the anguish of the last few years. You can see sort of a sense of tentative releasing. The artist was quick to mention that pain is not gone. It doesn't alleviate or doesn't, make it absent, but that it is a physical processing of all that we've been through and that they're experiencing.
Perfect segue to our next video.
Yes. So I'm really excited to be able to show media work in the gallery. Thank you to Rife Gallery for working tirelessly to make some very exciting and new things happen in this space. One of which is featured here, Sarah Paul's piece, a multimedia sculptural and expanded media piece here. I could talk a little bit about her inspiration, as you were mentioning. Yeah. So kind of in continuing that question about how are we processing some of these things that we've been going through? How are our bodies changing or just even interacting with all of these experiences from outside of us? In answer to that question, Sarah had developed this work, which is actually mostly seen from inside, as a way to almost reset the body and give us a chance to, do like a hard reset, if you could, start to see things new, start to give time to rest, and recuperate. So this work is meant to be entered in a minute, or okay. The artist asks us to go inside. The wool piece that's extending off the wall creates an amazing cavern inside with a bench. And the video piece, though beautifully, richly colored, has lots of movement and motion. From inside, you can experience it almost as if you might experience moving clouds, creating a cadence of light sound. You're encouraged to sit, to rest. Sometimes in gallery spaces, although we have here, they don't even offer a bench. So for persons who, might be tired, even just a space of quiet rest within this work.
So we were chatting about this a little bit earlier. I think it's really lovely also to have this as such a centerpiece within, you can see it through one of our doors, so it's, invites you in. The video here is abstract enough that anyone can spend a long or short amount of time with it. And actually, your words felt way better. So if you could articulate that, I would be grateful.
Well, one of the things that we've been talking about is how I've intentionally chosen this incredibly wide range of materials. And in some cases, a range that is larger than what curators might even consider dealing with. In part for their challenges in terms of installation, but also in terms of, there being newer practices that have less full histories. And so we don't always understand how they operate, maybe. What I love about this work, easily seen both from the street and from the lobby of the Rife Gallery here downtown, is that you can experience it in a way that you really can't with a painting. We had started our tour with that small painting, but here we have a giant wash of a space that allows people in just to be enticed by the movement of pixels, by the almost dancing light. And what's happening here is this piece of video art with a nice rich history of abstraction, of exploration, of the screen, of the form, of how it comes into this gallery space. But it's also very gentle to any viewer. You could sit and watch it for a moment and just enjoy it for those formal qualities, or you could stand and be somewhat mesmerized by it. You could spend a lot of time with it, not asking yourself, although some people may, but you wouldn't have to decide what it is. You wouldn't have to determine what it is showing, maybe in the way that we might expect a photo or a landscape painting to do. So you can have more of a sensorial experience.
Mm-hmm. Again, inviting the viewer to be a part of it. And so let's come around here to our next artist.
So this piece is by Kate Hempel. Kate is working in southeastern Ohio, is an art educator and artist, and has a huge exhibition history. I was very fortunate to see an earlier version of this piece in Chicago that was part of the Terrain Biennial there. And so during that time, when I was introduced to this artist and this work, it was outside. It was a site-specific piece that really interacted with the place, with Chicago as a city, with a community, with a home there, a dwelling, and all of the political, sociological happenings that go on in any city and in any community. And the artist created this work, High Water, as actually an architectural intervention. So in thinking about how do we maybe use our bodies to affect the positive change that we want to see, or even just to protect ourselves. The artist has this incredible process that you can see here, and we will see another piece that sort of shows off this process in a later work. She takes images of her body. This is her skin. It's printed onto polyester fabric, and then it's fashioned into, here we see it as sandbags. And it's pressing up against the institution of the Rife Gallery of this building, and probably somewhat even calling out to legislators across the street. It wants that conversation. It wants people to really feel the presence of the body within this gallery space.
Yeah, and I love the location too. So, you know, within the gallery, the architecture, this is typically a throughway, but we have plenty of space over here. So the artist is truly affecting the architecture and forcing our bodies to navigate differently.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to think about.
Yeah. I mean, you know, when we're talking about craft, this is maybe one of the newer experiments in craft that we're still navigating. What is digital photography? What is this new fabric printing? But you can see the quality here. Like on the edges, you have the shadow of the skin. It's really finely detailed, and they lay just so. They have this nice weight to them, and not in a grotesque fashion, but they sit there on each other, kind of as maybe organisms, you know, would out in public space.
Absolutely. All right, and let's travel a bit over here to Elaine. And Elaine has some things on the wall and some things on the pedestals. And she has fantastic titles.
Yes, I might ask for even some support on the titles. We'll get a few of these in here. We have lots of work from Elaine Hullihen, a Northeast Ohio, Cleveland-based artist who is working interdisciplinary. What we see in the gallery is primarily from their fibers-based practice, but they are also performance artists. I think you get a sense of that play here with some of these pieces. So we have on this side of the space, we have some of the smaller soft sculptures. All of this body of work, they're made from discarded clothing, but things that might have been formerly worn or used on a body. And you get a sense of that. I'll sort of look at a couple. We have up here one of the smaller pieces, Bundled Memory. And even in the details, we learn a little about its history. It is worn wool from a sweater. The artist shares with us it's their favorite sweatshirt. There's also a bathing suit, sewing scraps, and thread. So in this materiality, we're getting a sense of the artists almost journaling of their history and placing of their physical clothing items into this small bundled little piece that we have up here. And that continues. They all have a different sensibility about them. This one here, we have material support. And so this one is on a custom plaster plinth. We talk sometimes about it looks like eyelashes. And so these pieces are intentionally placed to reference the bodies that they came from. Oftentimes, the process of creating the artist follows, what might have been the natural course of the curve of an arm sleeve or the round of a collar. So you start to see kind of a reverse of the body into these forms as well. We'll keep walking. I think those details are probably visible in the larger ones too.
This one is definitely in the way the fringe hangs. I love the makeshift hammock here too, because it gives a anthropomorphic bit to it, right? So you can imagine what else might be in a hammock like this, or imagine yourself in a hammock once you see that. And what I also really appreciate about these works is that oftentimes art can use lots of materials that are not great for the environment. Mm-hmm. And so this conscious choice to use items, recycle them, not purchase new, mm-hmm. Respect the history of something and repurpose, feels really good too. They also have these, the large pieces over here have this reference to stone sculpture.
Yeah.
But they're soft.
Yes. So this collection especially, I think there's a really exciting conversation between the history of sculpture and contemporary practices in that field. This incredibly customized, all three of them, the plinths, and they have these rounded, shined edges. they're elevating these pieces, and they're, you know, in the history of sculpture, that's telling us this is something monumental. And historically, what we put on a pedestal or what we see as monumental would not maybe be everyday objects, and would also probably not reference, you know, the quirks or lesser beloved portions of our bodies. They might sometimes be stylized, highly, you know, refined figures at best. And so here, they feel sometimes like sleeping animals, or like, you know, that animalness of human, of pet. But yeah, rather than being stone and cold, they definitely exude a warmth. Like many things in the gallery, they make me want to wrap around them or hug them, though they are definitely art objects. And so I'm giving them distance, but they're pulling toward us. You see these kind of, like you've said, Easter eggs, the reveal of a shoe possibly popping out from the corner.
Yeah, the sole of a shoe just here. Yeah, and I love that you talk about the fact that these pedestals were specially made by their partner, because we even have the saying, put it on a pedestal, you know? So when you think about that and then relate it to what is it that we are putting on a pedestal here, it's pretty special. And many of these are knit pieces. And so also thinking about those lesser revered practices that we're fighting hard to get higher credit across the board, and we'll hear from another artist that's working on that too.
I was going to echo what you had said about the plinth, the relationship of the collaboration that makes these two come together. All of the way that these are presented make me think a lot about care. And so that's been coming up a lot in current contemporary art practices, but how does this exude care in its form and in, you know, even its presentation, with how much these objects are appreciated, elevated, you know, just warmly cared for. It gives this warm sense of wanting to see them, wanting to come near them, feeling really good around them.
Absolutely. It's a great transition to our next artist.
Yeah. So let's start in this portion. We have several works from our next artist, Lo Smith. Lo is Cleveland-based and works across mediums as well, an interdisciplinary artist, a printmaker, and an independent curator. So a very exciting combination of things there. And in their practice, they talk extensively about being inspired by, but challenging and digging into the history of especially medical uncare, if such a word existed, but the practice of harm on Black bodies through medical procedures. These two works, I think, especially open up that conversation. They're part of a larger series of collagraphs, meaning that the print was created by pressing the paper into some of the objects that you sort of can start to see here, so that there's an imprint, there's some depth to the paper, in addition to the painted imagery on top of those. And we're looking here, I mean, even their titles maybe don't go into as much detail. This one here, The Red Stitch. Both of these were created in 2023. And then to its side, the orange sun. When I hear especially the orange sun, I don't think about some of those deeper layers, but as I look, I can see almost a scarification onto the paper, and I start to feel a little bit more of that history that the artist is exploring into the paper. We're going to sort of turn our eyes to a piece that's in beautiful conversation with those first two. Also, still by Lo Smith. This is a custom created balaclava. We had talked about elevating some of these practices with textile and yarn. The piece is called Lay It Down, and a little secret tidbit in there, that is the letters that make up the form as well. The words Lay It Down are pieced in through the letters that you see and then embellished further.
So tell us a little bit, what is a balaclava?
Yes. So in the United States, I do not use this term very much. I watch a lot of BBC TV, so maybe it comes into my vernacular. But otherwise, I would think of this as, like a warming device or a face protector, especially in the winter. So this is a full face worn in this practice, somewhere between a ritual or maybe even a performative piece that would be worn by the artists themselves, and it would cover their face. And they've covered their face, though, with this elevating, self-revelatory, vision of both maybe sort of a reminder to lay down anything unnecessary or unneeded or not serving them, but also with gorgeously articulated style. I'm actually going to transition to one of the quotes that the artists used to describe themselves in that thought. And to not get it wrong, I will read it from here, if we have it still. Yes. So this artist, this is a third piece, but the description of their work, they say these pieces reflect their unapologetically Black and aggressively Midwestern identities. And I love that, both to describe what we've already seen and what we'll look at. What is it to be both of those things, unapologetically Black and aggressively Midwestern? So while I don't know the answers, I'm looking at these pieces with that in mind. This third piece is Bariati. It is a full printed textile created through actually a exchange with Fabric Workshop Museum in Philadelphia. And the artist screen printed on repeat a custom design that they created. This to me is the most playful of all of these pieces. Still considering the forms of the body, how it enters into visuality, into symbols, how it might be dancing, but also how we are extracting it maybe, how we are seeing it as outside of itself. So lots of questions here, lots of things to explore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you're aggressively Midwestern, you have to scooch right by someone at some point, and you have to say "ope" a little bit. Ope. That what I also really appreciate about this piece is that the artist, when they were talking to me, shared with me that it was really important that the edges were unfinished.
Right.
So you don't necessarily think about fabric being displayed with an unfinished edge, but to recognize that as an important piece gives it even more, I think, reference to the body. So,
yeah, and then going back to these conversations we keep having about craft, about form and formality, and what is considered professionally elevated art. And so here, we're challenging that a little bit. This is a gorgeous, professionally crafted print, series of prints really, but then allowing it to have some free form in its life and how we see it.
It speaks to the ephemerality, which is lovely, because a fray infers breakdown.
Mm.
So.
Or the edges of things and allowing it to have that, have that boundary, have that undefinedness. Yeah. Lovely. Super exciting.
How about we move over to Hala?
Okay. So we have two works by Hala Aboubakr, and they are two custom sculptures on their own plinths. These are one of the few items in the gallery that we are allowed to touch. So we'll talk a little bit about that, maybe show some of that. Hala is an artist of Palestinian descent, an Arab artist who was born and raised in Jordan and got their sculptural degree in Jordan, was actually one of the first female sculptors to go through that program. They came to the United States, are currently working and living in Athens, Ohio, pursuing their PhD in both artistic practice and research at Ohio University. So I'm really excited. When I found Hala's work, this is a newer artist for me. But we were really well aligned with some of the conversations about both of visuality in the work, and then how are we considering how we move through the world individually in relationship to our communities, both large and small. Hala talks extensively about her experience, not always centered within conversations, within experiences, and this notion of being pushed to the margins or to the periphery. And so these two pieces are part of a larger body of work that considers what is it to center oneself. The artist we'll talk about how. The artist has placed themselves central in the work, and then in kind, we've placed it pretty centrally through this space in the gallery so that we can walk around it, we can move ourselves to it, but it is solidly present and very well respected within this space. And so the process of making these works, it might not be immediately apparent. I think you had said that this was a bit of a surprise, but you see it once we talk about it and you can't unsee it. These pieces are created through castings of the artist's body. And so they form to the exterior of their body as almost a protective sheath or shell, and then are amplified through the affixture of this, in both cases, fabric, and then resin, and finally the wire and strings, again on a custom plinth, versions of plinth. So that we have this, like we were talking about early, almost a imprint of the body into this space, almost a, not a reverse, but definitely a full presence of their experience here with us now.
Yeah, I love what you talk about as far as in placement and how they take up space. Mm-hmm. What I love about the work is that it also invites you into that space. Yeah. By the nature of it being a playable piece, they're asking for you to, yes, respect their body within a space, but also come and have an experience. Yeah. And that's pretty unique.
Yeah, and vulnerable and brave. And I think that's part of what is really exciting. If I walked in and saw these, I would feel those senses already. They have, a really firm craft to them, but that vulnerability, that tangibility. And so I sort of enter feeling very privileged to be able to have this encounter. I start to think about what the artist has crafted as an encounter. They're dictating based on the structure and the form and how it sits, how I enter this space and how I am allowed and what parts I may see. And so they get to determine that. In this case, the artist may not always feel that she has that opportunity to do that. And so she's expressing it here.
Do you want to play it?
I do, I do.
Please.
So these pieces are allowed to be played. And as I was talking about, it's a ritual encounter, so it feels very special and it feels very tenuous even. But yeah, we are allowed and it's quite lovely. And I can imagine myself having a much longer encounter with this piece. You start to feel like you are in really close contact with the artist. Mm-hmm. Like it's a way, again, to kind of process that interrelationship, that all of those considerations that we were talking about.
Lovely. And so, still kind of referencing the body.
Yeah.
We get to have a quick look again at Kate Hempel.
Yes. So this is the second work by Kate Hempel. You can immediately recognize how it has similar processes. Again, the artist has printed custom fabric with their skin highly visible, a large-scale sculpture, very different presence of the body into the gallery. It comes off the wall, it enters into space, it curves around. This piece was sort of, had been created after high water was considered. It's called Desperate Measures. And we were talking before, what does it mean to place one's body again so largely, so visibly, so protrudingly into a space?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes you a little uneasy when you come upon it.
Yeah.
Right? And it is larger than life. As I stood here for a reason because I wanted you to see, how high it is and how it's hung there. Like it's a stretch of skin over that and then laid out.
So this one, I feel the weight of, so there's sand into these pieces. It's interesting because I think about the literal sandbags, but this one feels heavier. It feels pulled. It's gesture along the floor on the ground. Also, it just feels really weighted. And so I'm excited about that in combination with some of these other works too.
Yeah. And then we're going to come around here to have a look at April.
Yes. So this entire wall and installation is April D. Filipe, an artist working in southeastern Ohio. A very well-known ceramicist, as we can start to see, who teaches and exhibits widely. This is another newer artist for me. So when I was looking for how are artists visualizing representations of the body and their work, I came across April's, not even shown here, but larger body of work of these medium-sized, wall-based, and small sculptures. And if you've seen them, they have these visions of hair in like repeated lines. Sometimes they show hands, sometimes even hands holding. And always with this palette, this stark white against a boldly printed patterns. And so when we were talking and deciding, yes, we definitely want this work in the gallery, but we were looking at what piece. And it was actually through conversations with the artists that thinking about how we're crafting all of these kind of zones of experience. This was a work that April had done that takes full advantage of kind of like coming out of gallery space and claiming it within this sculpture. The full piece, titled, "Yet I Am Still Here to See You," entrances me in many ways and probably does take a tight look because you're drawn into that word see. And so from afar, from up close, I look first at this figure. It has a quintessential bun. The artist often references almost a hair-like gesture on top, and then a sort of curvature of the figure form. We think maybe it's a child, maybe it's a friend. Sometimes this feels like it might even be a grandparent. The artist calls this figure like a ghost, which to me is very telling. And so we have this ceramic whiteness pulling off against all of this incredibly custom-made wallpaper with the intricate detailing. If you can see, this again references braided hair, buns of hair, plaits of hair, kind of tossed into the what looks like flowers and floral print. And sort of a desaturated tone. And then from above, we see that surrounding the ceramic figure are these multiple fiber collaged pieces. Again, those bold patterns that start to feel maybe again like home. So we're referencing that interior, maybe domestic spaces, different ways of warming a floor. It has a sense of rug, even though it's lifted up off the ground. I have to, the continued use of fringe in this show to both give us that height, but also after we've seen Elaine Hullihen's work, goes back again to how it references the body. So as I look at this figure situated within a very complex, multifaceted, detailed, lush environment, I really think about how April talks about this as navigating, moving through the world, as she is an American artist, but of Puerto Rican and Dominican descent. What is that like? What is that like moving through different spaces within the body and within how people see her?
Yeah. There are so many opportunities for discovery in this work. From are those plantains or bananas within there? That probably bananas, because those are also, it's just the longer you look, the more you're rewarded. And this you think is, that structure in and of itself, but as you come up, you see there's a soft coloring in what seem to be the dimples for the eyes, but they also kind of reference buttons.
Yeah, that's why I'm really glad we took a close look. It has that stitch with each indentation. So is it a reverse of a button? Is it, was there something in the socket that isn't there now? Yeah.
And then there are these really softly toned also references to hair down at the bottom that if you don't pay attention, you're not going to see them. But if you give yourself the gift of a slow look, you're going to discover so much in this. And the other piece that it was such a treat to discover as I was looking through the works is additional ceramic bits here that almost feel like little ears or teardrops that are highly stylized with those lovely drawings as well. It's an altar to recognition of self for me. That you round the corner and it's like,
yeah, it's really breathtaking to come around into this portion of the gallery, all of the works, one building on top of another, and then to see this space and to take some time with it.
Yeah, and how many of them have that really wonderful relationship to each other. They're just, again, if you take a moment to think about what did I just see and how is that relating to this, you're gonna have even more development of richness. So I think this is a good time for us to pop over to the other Kate.
Yes. So here, and toward the front entrance, which maybe we'll look at as a last look or leave as a secret perhaps, we have the work of Kate Budd, many works of Kate Budd. Collection of small sculptures, all metal worked and developed through a process of lost wax casting. And so these have been formulated, they intricately developed through that incredibly, technically rigorous process that Kate is very well known for. Kate is an exciting artist for Ohio. Kate works in Akron and is a professor at the University of Akron, but she is also a 4-time Ohio Arts Council Individual Arts Excellence Award winner. And you can see why as we're looking at the superior detail, technical prowess of these works.
Technical prowess is right.
Yeah.
My goodness. Yeah, when you think about the amount of time and talent that it takes to execute these, so she's got this wax material that can be pretty fiddly, and these small tools that she's creating these robust pieces with, like these, when you look at an image of them, they could be any size.
Right. Yeah, that's why we're coming up so close so that you can see even reference that they are hand-sized. In some cases, smaller than, some of the pieces fit within a hand-sized element. They are patinaed very specifically and then also, shined again, in specific areas. We see this one, I think the mermaid's purse here, where just the tail has that shine on it, but then the patina really gives off the texture on the back of that lined figure here.
I love how they play with each other too. Yeah. Like this table, actually both of them, they all have, almost all of them have more than one component. And so there is, I think, a beautiful relationship to the concept of this exhibition in how things play together, how things interact. So like clearly they have relationship, and it's you can imagine things,
Yeah.
right? And as we're talking about imagining things.
Yeah. So these are all kind of, they come out of Kate's imagination. She grew up in Scotland and talks about going to the museums and seeing older relics or artifacts that were not necessarily known what their purpose was or how they were, how they were operating in society, but piqued your interest and made you, almost develop that backstory. And so throughout these pieces, Kate has built this body of work around an imagined society, a matriarchal society, where these are used as instruments of instruction. And they are, intended to inform, to excite, maybe to offer curiosity about the world around us. Specific to this exhibition, because of this concept that we're working with of interconnectivity and literal touch, she has paired many of them into these new configurations. So some of these are from 2018, some from 2023, but their arrangements are definitely with that in mind. So we have these pairings maybe of two going toward each other, of one resting on top of another, being maybe cradled on top of or tucking half into, precariously perched. We're not sure, slithering in or slithering out. This one almost, were they made for each other or did they find each other?
Maybe both.
Probably. And then there's this one also kind of reminds me of Hala's work, this notion of protection. Mm-hmm. So one has even wrapped itself on top of, mm-hmm. as if it's giving, like a small cave-like protection action here. Mm-hmm. So these are all of the bronze work, both are bronze, but this other collection has gold plated. Yeah. And with the underlayment as well, I start to, and their descriptions, we start to think about maybe not so much the playful, instructional, almost childlike use, but a ritualized, formalized, maybe prescribed, I think about special interactive rites of procedure.
Yeah, like how might ceremony.
How might these be ceremoniously, part of an exchange, be offered, be received. Mm-hmm. And so we have a really elevated sort of look at the same type of work here.
And just beautifully laid out. The artist is so specific in how she wants these to relate to each other, and you feel it, like they feel so special. It feels, you want to touch them so bad, so bad.
And it's interesting because we were talking before about the scale of grandeur, and how that occupies a gallery space with its size, with its, taking up space. We've talked about that a lot. And here we have these very small objects captivating through a really different technique, mm-hmm. where you are, it demands the attention, it demands kind of almost like you were talking about with April's piece, like a second look, a closer read. And so it has a different power. It pulls you in without needing to take up more mm-hmm. space.
It's really intimate.
Yeah.
When you have small work, it demands an intimate look. You can't have many people looking at the same time. It's not, physically it's not possible. Maybe a little bit more with sculpture because you can get a couple of people.
Right.
But there's something really special about that too.
Yeah.
So.
And in the context of this exhibition, I just cannot get over how they all feel, very hand-sized, so that I almost can feel them warming up in my pocket or in my hands.
Yeah. All right, so we have two more artists, and this next one is here on the wall.
So here we have the work of Amber N. Ford, an artist that I have known for some time. They are Cleveland-based photographer and photojournalist. I'm standing a little bit to the side because these incredible works are also somewhat deceptive. You might even want to see if you can get that play of light and shadow from the angles. These are 3 photographs of different types of black hair. And the artist is talking about, throughout this series, throughout their entire work, how do we look at and how do we multiply the word Black? How do we expand it both in these color saturations and then also in cultural context to understand that it's not a monolithic, singular experience. And we're seeing that in the most stunning, formally presented, very, again, detailed, intimate, very close readings of different types of Black hair. So this is 3 pieces from a larger series. Here we have number 1, Pronto. And then on the end, we have Knotless, which I think is really interesting as the braided, plaited. One can start to understand the deeper meanings, even in their titles and in their inferences.
I really appreciate within these works that the hair is layered in such a way that it is the only thing that you can see. There's no background beyond that either. It gives you a depth and a richness that keeps you centered on the subject in a really beautiful way. They're fantastically organized within the frame as well, so it gives your eye something to rest on and appreciate in a deeper way.
Yeah, I'm excited by this seeming challenge that the artists gave themselves to work as it would look only with Black, going back to that color spectrum, but then also finding, as I assume she already knew, how much depth there is, how much of the light, the play off the edges and the curves you start to get from that imagery.
All right, shall we?
Yes.
All right, our last artist is here on the title wall. So it's 2 diptychs.
So these are 4 pieces, as Kat said, 2 diptychs by Rebecca Nava Soto, and they were created in 2021. I saved these for last, even though this is the title wall from our exhibition, because these really encapsulate both the concepts we've been talking about and also maybe what we might want viewers to take away as they leave the gallery space. Rebecca has named these based on her history as a Chicanx and a Latinx artist with a rich study of indigenous North American cultures, both through the United States and in Mexico, and deep history. And so these images and their titles and their meanings come through those origins. We have below on both sides to conjure, and then above on both sides is to write. And we see again the hand of the maker or the hand of the creator, we're not sure, but we see the body enter this space of action through those hands. And we hear this echo and this call into the world that as we were asking, as I was asking, how do we interact? How do we engage this world? Rebecca's work answers for me. We conjure, we write. And so here it kind of sums up what these artists are doing. They're sharing that physicalized experience. They're sharing, a deep history, a deep knowledge that is visual arts, but is also, their communities, their families, their personal relationships. And this form of, we call it writing, but writing is a deep technology. It's communication, it's symbols, it's ascribing what we understand in a way others could understand. So for me, these pieces really summarize everything that we're looking at in this exhibition.
Perfect. Yeah, so when you have a chance, make sure you get up close and personal with these works as well. The texture from far away is delightful, but when you get closer, there's a deepness to it, and then want to understand how exactly this artist did this. Like it's exceptionally well done.
So these are created through pigmented wood shavings. And again, going back to the artist's practice as overlaying contemporary and indigenous, it references alfombras, which are also created from that found materiality, and they're sort of collaged out of the multiple works. And so the artist, I don't know all of the secrets, but they have made these based on those sort of traditions that they're experiencing too.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, folks, this is the exhibition InTouch, curated by Megan Young. Thank you so much again for your time and talent. Come and see this exhibition. It is wonderful. Thank you to the Governor's Office, the Legislature, the Ohio Arts Council Board, who support the Ohio Arts Council, this great space, and of course, Ohio artists.